Joining us now is Iran expert Maleki. He is senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and he helped design the Treasury Department's sanctions against the Iranian regime. He did some great math over the weekend on X. And Miad, we're really glad to have you here because I am in no way suggesting that the Strait of Hormuz or the Arabian or Persian Gulf is not important to the world. It certainly is. But did the point get made that relatively it is less important than it was just a couple weeks ago?
I mean, you're making a good point. And hey, thanks for having me. I think you're making a good point here. It is less and becoming less and less relevant. But also keep in mind, it's not just crude oil and oil that comes out of the Strait of Hormuz. You also have some kind of a effect on commodities such as jet fuel that comes out of Strait of Hormuz. So I think those are kind of commodities that if we don't see a flow out of the Strait of Hormuz and a resumption of normal flow of commerce from the Strait of Hormuz, you're going to see some effect on those type of commodities. But as you pointed out, rightly, Iranian oil, they're 1.5, 1.6, now down to 1.4 billions of barrels of oil that goes, millions of barrels of oil that goes out of the Strait of Hormuz. That oil is only feeding Chinese mid-sized, small-sized teapot refineries that purchasing this oil at a discounted rate, and then they produce petrochemical products at much lower level, and then they compete with U.S. products and U.S. markets. So I don't think it's a bad thing that oil might not reach China.
Yeah, and my guess is that you're going to hear that China has bought up a ton of the global strategic petroleum oil reserve release, greatly even more refilling their already full stockpiles. That said, your point is well taken, Miad. We have talked a lot on this network and this program about fertilizer, about helium for semiconductors, about potable water, about all the supply disruptions that come through the Gulf. Would you agree that the only real question that matters right now is will this naval blockade work to help more ships more safely enter and exit the Gulf, or will Iran still try to control it with missiles and drones? Because if ship traffic doesn't increase, all those things that we just talked about are kind of moot.
I mean, that's a really question. It's $1 million question. I think Iranians are going to try to escalate. I mean, this is their only leverage that they're left with. They don't have a nuclear program that they can use as a way of blackmailing the international community. Their control, or not really control, I would say the ability to cause chaos in the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf is really what they're left with. So it really, the presence of U.S. naval forces and hopefully other nations that might join to help might really disrupt Iran's ability, or maybe cause a decline in Iran's ability to cause issues in the Strait of Hormuz. I can envision some kind of air campaign or airstrikes to go after RRGC's, Iranian Islamic Republic, or Islamic Republic Guard Corps to conduct drone operations or missile operations against the flow of commerce in the Strait of Hormuz. But I wouldn't be surprised if Iranians show all their cards now. Go after some of these tankers, possibly go after some of the oil field or oil production facilities across the Gulf. But that ability is going to decline very quickly. I would argue that Iran's economy is the most vulnerable economy, I would say globally, to what's happening in Strait of Hormuz. They're going to have major issues as far as paying salaries domestically. They're not going to get oil out that is paying their armed forces salaries. So they're going to have to face some real problems domestically.
And we're just going to focus on Iran, not all the other stuff that's critical that we talked about, Mial. But if Iran cannot export oil safely, because there were no U.S. military ships there as of a week ago, now there are. Things have changed. If they cannot export oil at all, how long can they economically hold out?
Well, I mean, there are a couple of questions. Really good point. I think, first of all, if they can get oil out and you continue to see some kind of a disruption to the flow of Iranian oil out of the Strait of Hormuz, then I think they only have maybe 2 weeks of a storage left to keep storing their oil. Maybe like filling up all their tankers. Most of them are already filled up already. And the main problem here is they're going to have to drop their oil extraction. And when you drop your oil extraction, you're really causing a permanent or long-term issue or problem to your oil wells. And that might lead into some kind of a domestic friction, unemployment rising, and strikes. Economically speaking, I think if they can keep sending oil out, they're going to have less money in China that they can use for import. But keep in mind, the import is going to be subject to blockade as well. So they really have to look domestically to see if how much they can continue to tax their population. That's an issue. Their steel production has dropped by 70% as a result of the strikes. Petrochemical output has dropped up to 80%, I've heard, because of the strikes. So they're not even generating enough tax internally to pay salaries. It's hard to come up with a number of days, but I think the can go another couple of weeks without.